Hi, I'm Nancy Smyth, and I'm Dean at the University of Buffalo School of Social Work. Thanks for taking some time to hear more about our new master's curriculum, one which integrates a trauma-informed and human rights perspective throughout the master's curriculum. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why we decided to make this change, why I think it's important, and then you'll be hearing a lot more from other people about the details of the changes. Let me start first with the concept of trauma-informed. Here at the school, we've had a trauma counseling certificate for many years, actually since 2000, and we've gotten a lot of feedback from people in the community who've gone through that program about what an important difference that perspective made in the work that they were doing. These are not people who were doing trauma counseling per se. I'm talking people in probation, people in domestic violence shelters, people who were doing prevention and planning and policy work. We began to listen to that and take that feedback and started to think about it a little bit more, because one of the things that we've learned from research is that by and large the populations that social workers serve are people who've been exposed to at least one type and often multiple types of trauma, and that it's really the rule and not the exception in those agencies, so that frequently we're looking at prevalence rates of 3/4 to 90 or 100% for many of the agencies. And yet the identification and assessment and understanding about how trauma affects people, those issues are not still something that you can find uniformly available throughout social work and throughout the human service profession. So we really got feedback that we were doing something important and that people thought it needed to be done even more so. And so we really started to look to inform our curriculum based upon this information, but in a very broad way, to really say what kinds of policies and programs would we develop if we really understood how trauma affected people. And if people can bring this perspective to all of the types of social work that they do. And then there may be people who choose to become trauma counselors per se, but this is really about bringing that lens in a very broad way to understand the work that we do. What's really important about a trauma perspective, trauma-informed perspective in particular, is that understanding that most of what we call problems or symptoms in the people who've been exposed to trauma are really almost better seen as strengths, as things that people are doing, have done in the past that really were helpful to them in situations where they were traumatized, and that really make a lot of sense when you understand what people lived through. So in that way, it's very similar to a strengths perspective that social work has held for many years. To paraphrase Ann Jennings, someone who's written about this, it's not about what's wrong with you, it's about what happened to you. And that's really the essence of a trauma-informed perspective. Also very consistent with social work perspective that really focuses on depathologizing and understanding people's strengths. The other important thing about trauma that I try to teach and have always worked with my clients on is that it really, to be traumatized involves a loss of power, a sense of helplessness in some way. And therefore, recovery is always about empowerment. And again, empowerment is a very core value to the social work profession, and it really harkens back to our very beginning days, and so an important value that we've always taught to students and that every other school of social work has taught. But understanding in terms of power and trauma, that's a lens that's a little bit different in terms of what we bring here. And that leads me to the next piece, which is the human rights. Almost all the trauma survivors that I've worked with also had their human rights violated in the process. And so those things often go hand in hand. But human rights is a much broader perspective than this. And human rights is, in fact, really a global perspective, and that was one of the reasons that we really tried to settle on it, because it has global implications, it brings a global lens, and yet it's very relevant at a very day-to-day level of the individuals that we work with. And so bringing in that perspective, I think, helps to both connect our local and individual issues to larger global perspectives. I think it integrates well with trauma in the sense that there is overlap between the areas. But the beauty of the human rights perspective is it really allows us to bring in social and economic justice issues, which are, again, very core to the social work profession, and which are very much part of a human rights perspective. And in this way, human rights perspective will focus also on the need for action at some larger level in the community, at a program or policy level. And For empowerment and for trauma survivors, action at a larger level is often a part of a recovery process. So again, there's overlap between these perspectives. But I don't want to give the impression that we see these two perspectives as being the same, or even that they always fit together. There are some natural tensions between them, and we actually think that's a good thing. This is about bringing these two themes together in the ways that they fit, highlighting some of the ways that they may not fit, the ways that help us to really understand the world that we're in, the world that we live in and then that we work with our clients and client systems in. It's not a world that fits easily into little boxes and into one way of seeing things. And so in places where we see discrepancies and contradictions, those actually can enhance our understanding and help us develop a stronger sense of what it means to work with people, to help them to bring about change in their lives. And so we're very excited about what these perspectives bring. What we're really doing here is adding some lenses to what we've already been doing. We're still teaching the in-depth knowledge about specific populations and practices, practice methods that people are looking to get from an MSW program. In addition to that, we've integrated these perspectives because we think it brings about some paradigm shifts that will be really essential to being successful social workers in the next century. Really help to make us social workers with a global perspective and a perspective that really works to help people make fundamental changes in their lives. So thanks again for taking the time. I think as you listen more to the details about this that you'll be excited as well. And we're always interested in your comments about what we're doing.